The Wagner Group, History, Present and Future. Introduction. The Wagner Group has emerged as a significant player in modern warfare, operating as a private military company (PMC) with close ties to the Russian state. Founded in 2014 by Yevgeny Prigozhin, a businessman with a background in catering, the group has been deployed in various conflict zones including Ukraine, Syria, and several African nations. This report explores the history, current status, and potential future of the Wagner Group. History and development. Formation and early operations. The Wagner Group was formally established in 2014 during the Ukraine conflict, specifically in the Donbas region, where it provided support to pro-Russian separatists. The name Wagner is believed to be derived from the call sign of its first military commander, Dmitry Utkin, a former officer in the Russian Special Forces. The group operated under a veil of secrecy, allowing the Russian government to maintain plausible deniability about its involvement in various military operations. In 2015, Wagner expanded its operations to Syria, where it supported the Assad regime against opposition forces. The group's effectiveness and tactical capabilities gained attention, leading to an increase in personnel and resources. Expansion and recruitment strategies. The Wagner Group's size and scope significantly increased during the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. In an unprecedented move, Prigozhin began recruiting prisoners from Russian jails, offering them a chance at freedom in exchange for their service on the front lines. This strategy allowed Wagner to boost its ranks, reportedly reaching up to 25,000 fighters at its peak. Wagner's operations extended beyond Ukraine and Syria, with deployments in Libya, the Central African Republic, Sudan, and Mali. In these regions, the group often provided military training and support in exchange for access to valuable natural resources, such as gold and diamonds. Leadership changes and controversies. Yevgeny Prigozhin's leadership was marked by a complex relationship with the Russian military establishment. He publicly criticized the Russian Defense Ministry for its handling of the war in Ukraine, leading to a significant rift within the military hierarchy. This tension culminated in a brief armed rebellion in June 2023, where Wagner forces advanced toward Moscow before reaching a negotiated settlement that allowed them to relocate to Belarus. Tragically, on August 23, 2023, Prigozhin died in a plane crash along with several top Wagner commanders. The circumstances surrounding the crash raised suspicions of foul play, with many attributing the incident to the Russian state's desire to eliminate a potential rival. Current status. Wagner's operations post-Prigozhin. Following Prigozhin's death, leadership of the Wagner Group passed to his son Pavel Prigozhin. Although the group's future remains uncertain, reports suggest that Wagner may be transitioning into a more formalized structure under the Russian National Guard, potentially diminishing its previous autonomy. Despite these changes, Wagner's presence in Africa has continued to grow. In nations like the Central African Republic and Mali, the group has maintained its operations, providing military support while simultaneously securing lucrative mining contracts. The Russian government has also expressed intentions to integrate Wagner's operations within the broader scope of its military and geopolitical objectives. Global perception and sanctions. The Wagner Group has faced increasing scrutiny and condemnation for its activities, including allegations of human rights abuses and war crimes. Many countries, particularly in the West, have designated Wagner as a terrorist organization or imposed sanctions against its leadership and operations. The United States, the European Union, and several other nations have taken steps to curtail Wagner's influence, particularly in Africa. Future outlook. Potential developments. The future of the Wagner Group is fraught with uncertainty. While the organization has shown resilience in its operations, the loss of its charismatic leader Prigozhin may lead to a decline in its effectiveness and influence. Analysts suggest that Wagner's integration into the Russian state apparatus could result in a loss of the independence that characterized its previous operations. However, there are also indications that Wagner may continue to thrive in Africa. The demand for security services in unstable regions coupled with Russia's strategic interests in the continent provides a fertile ground for Wagner's expansion. The group's ability to operate in a low-profile, deniable manner aligns well with Russia's broader foreign policy objectives. Geopolitical implications. The Wagner Group's activities have significant implications for global security and international relations. Its operations in Africa, particularly in resource-rich nations, may lead to increased competition for influence among global powers. Additionally, the group's involvement in conflicts can exacerbate local tensions and contribute to human rights abuses, further complicating the geopolitical landscape. Conclusion. The Wagner Group represents a complex intersection of private military operations and state-sponsored aggression. Its history reflects the evolving nature of modern warfare, where deniability and flexibility are paramount. As the group navigates the aftermath of Prigozhin's death and the shifting dynamics of international conflict, its future remains uncertain but undoubtedly impactful. The implications of Wagner's actions will continue to resonate across the globe, shaping the future of warfare and international relations for years to come. The Wagner Group, often described as a paramilitary organization or private military company (PMC), has engaged in various military and security operations globally, particularly in conflict zones such as Ukraine, Syria, and several African nations. Founded in 2014 by Yevgeny Prigozhin, a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, the group's activities have raised significant concerns regarding human rights abuses and its role as a tool of Russian foreign policy. Historical background and development. 1. Formation. The Wagner Group's origins can be traced back to the annexation of Crimea by Russia in 2014, where it first gained prominence by supporting pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine's Donbas region. Initially composed of experienced military personnel, it has since evolved to include a diverse recruitment strategy, notably incorporating prisoners as fighters in exchange for clemency. 2. Expansion of operations. The group's activities expanded significantly after its involvement in the Syrian civil war, where it provided essential military support to the Assad regime. Its operations grew to include engagements in Libya, the Central African Republic, Mali, and other regions, often in exchange for access to natural resources. 3. Leadership changes. The death of Prigozhin in a plane crash in August 2023 has left the group's future uncertain. His son Pavel Prigozhin has reportedly taken over leadership, but the implications of this transition alongside internal and external pressures remain to be seen. Key events timeline. 2014, Wagner is established during the conflict in Ukraine. 2015, the group becomes involved in Syria supporting the Assad government. 2022, Wagner plays a crucial role in Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, leading to significant recruitment drives, including inmates from Russian prisons. 2023, a brief mutiny led by Prigozhin against the Russian military's leadership occurs in June, culminating in a reconciliation deal with Putin. Later, Prigozhin's death raises questions about the group's future direction. Operations in Africa. The Wagner Group's activities in Africa are characterized by a pattern of providing military support to struggling regimes in exchange for access to lucrative resources. This has raised allegations of neo-colonialism and human rights violations. Central African Republic, Wagner operatives provide security for the government and protect mining operations, often engaging in violent suppression of dissent. Sudan, the group has been implicated in supporting the Sudanese military amid protests, with reports of involvement in human rights abuses. Mali, following coups, Wagner has been deployed to assist the military junta, leading to accusations of civilian massacres. Commonalities and divergences among sources. Despite the overwhelming consensus on the Wagner Group's ties to the Russian state and its role in various conflicts, opinions differ regarding its future. Pessimistic views. Some analysts believe that the group's influence will wane following Prigozhin's death, losing its operational autonomy and effectiveness. Optimistic perspectives. Others argue that under new leadership the group might continue its expansion, particularly in Africa where it has cultivated significant relationships. Future prospects. The Wagner Group's future remains uncertain, particularly in light of the ongoing geopolitical dynamics and internal Russian military restructuring. While rumors suggest a potential integration into the National Guard of Russia, its operational methods may shift towards more covert activities, continuing to serve Russian geopolitical interests. Counterintuitive insights. 1. Plausible deniability. The Wagner Group's existence as a private entity allows the Russian government to maintain plausible deniability for its military operations abroad despite substantial evidence linking them directly to state actions. This complexity makes it challenging for international actors to respond effectively. 2. Recruitment of prisoners. The strategy of recruiting prisoners highlights a paradox within the Russian military framework. While this approach provides a seemingly expendable source of manpower, it also raises ethical concerns and questions about the effectiveness and loyalty of such recruits in combat situations. 3. Financial operations. The group's ability to fund its operations through illicit resource extraction in conflict zones demonstrates a duality of warfare and economics. It blurs the lines between military engagement and corporate interests, complicating international responses and sanctions. The Wagner Group's ongoing operations and transformations will likely continue to shape global security dynamics, particularly in regions where conflict and governance challenges intersect with external interventions. The Wagner Group, a private military company associated with the Russian state, has had a significant impact on various conflicts and geopolitical landscapes since its inception in 2014. While many aspects of its operations have been documented, several important elements may not receive the attention they deserve. Below are key points that are significant but often overlooked in discussions surrounding the Wagner Group. 1. Complex organizational structure. The Wagner Group operates as a decentralized network rather than a single corporate entity. This complexity obscures its operations and makes it difficult for external observers to track its movements and affiliations. The group's connections to various shell companies and its use of intermediaries for financial transactions complicate efforts to impose sanctions or restrict its activities. Understanding this structure is crucial because it allows Wagner to operate with plausible deniability, making it challenging for governments to hold it accountable for its actions. 2. Recruitment tactics. Wagner's recruitment strategy, particularly the enlistment of prisoners, has significant implications for the nature of its operations. By recruiting convicts with promises of pardons, Wagner has been able to bolster its ranks rapidly, particularly during conflicts in Ukraine. This practice raises important ethical concerns and contributes to a tactical approach that prioritizes quantity over quality in combat scenarios. The use of inexperienced fighters as cannon fodder in frontline operations has led to high casualty rates, which in turn impacts public perception of the group and its effectiveness. 3. Human rights violations and war crimes. While the Wagner Group has been accused of numerous human rights violations and war crimes across different theaters of operation, these accusations often fail to garner sustained international outrage. Cases such as the Bazir massacre in the Central African Republic, where Wagner operatives were implicated in horrific acts of violence against civilians, highlight the urgent need for accountability mechanisms. However, these violations frequently become overshadowed by the larger geopolitical narratives surrounding Russia's military actions, especially in Ukraine. 4. Geopolitical implications in Africa. Wagner's operations in Africa are often framed in terms of resource extraction and military support for authoritarian regimes. However, the broader implications of these activities for regional stability and international relations are significant. The group's involvement in African nations like the Central African Republic and Mali exemplifies a form of neo-colonialism where Russia gains influence through military support in exchange for access to natural resources. This dynamic has the potential to reshape alliances and further entrench authoritarianism in the region with long-term consequences for democratic governance and human rights. 5. Internal dynamics and leadership changes. The death of Yevgeny Prigozhin in August 2023 has introduced uncertainty regarding the future of the Wagner Group. While some sources speculate about a decline in the group's influence, others suggest that new leadership may continue its operations, particularly in Africa. The transition from Prigozhin to his son Pavel and the potential integration of Wagner into the Russian National Guard raise questions about the continuity of Wagner's operational tactics and strategic goals. Monitoring these transitions is crucial for understanding how the group's influence may evolve in the context of Russian military strategy. 6. The role of ideology. The group's ties to far-right and neo-Nazi elements, particularly through factions like the Rusik unit, are often understated. While Wagner's operations are primarily driven by financial and strategic interests, the ideological motivations of some of its members complicate the narrative. This connection to extremist ideologies can affect the group's operational behavior and tactics, leading to brutal engagements that may resonate with nationalist sentiments in Russia. The implications of such ideology can influence public support for Wagner's activities domestically and its acceptance internationally. 7. International response and sanctions. The global response to Wagner's activities has been fragmented, with various countries designating it as a terrorist organization or imposing sanctions. However, the effectiveness of these measures is questionable given the group's ability to adapt and operate through various networks. The lack of a coordinated international strategy to address Wagner's operations complicates efforts to curb its influence. Understanding the limitations of current sanctions and the need for a comprehensive approach involving diplomatic, legal, and military strategies is critical for addressing the threats posed by Wagner. 8. Media representation and public perception. The portrayal of the Wagner Group in the media often emphasizes its role in high-profile conflicts like the war in Ukraine, overshadowing its extensive activities in Africa and the Middle East. This narrow focus can lead to misconceptions about the group's scope and capabilities. A broader media narrative that encompasses all of Wagner's operations would better inform public understanding and highlight the multifaceted challenges posed by this organization. Conclusion. The Wagner Group exemplifies the complexities of modern warfare, where private military companies operate with state backing while engaging in activities that blur the lines of legality and morality. While discussions often center on its military engagements, understanding the group's organizational structure, recruitment practices, human rights implications, and its evolving geopolitical role is essential for comprehensively addressing the challenges it poses both regionally and globally. The future of Wagner, particularly in light of leadership changes and international responses, will be a critical area to watch as its influence continues to shape the dynamics of conflict in the 21st century. 1. Historical context and development. The Wagner Group emerged in 2014 during the conflict in Ukraine, providing support to pro-Russian separatists. Their activities expanded significantly, particularly during the Syrian civil war and the rise of Russian military operations in Africa. By 2022, the group had a reported 25,000 fighters, largely due to the recruitment of prisoners, highlighting the organization's adaptability and the Russian government's reliance on private military contractors to achieve its geopolitical goals without direct military involvement. 2. Relationship with the Russian state. The Wagner Group operates in a complex legal and operational framework that allows the Russian government to maintain plausible deniability regarding its military actions abroad. Despite being described as a private military company, evidence suggests that Wagner is closely tied to the Russian state, receiving funding and logistical support from the Defense Ministry. This relationship underscores how the Kremlin utilizes the group to further its interests while minimizing political and military repercussions. 3. Human rights violations and international response. Wagner's activities, particularly in countries like the Central African Republic, Libya, and Mali, have been marred by allegations of human rights abuses, including torture, executions, and the use of banned weaponry. International bodies have increasingly designated Wagner as a terrorist organization, reflecting growing concerns over its operations and the broader implications for global security and human rights. This increasing scrutiny may lead to more stringent sanctions and efforts to curtail Wagner's influence. 4. Future prospects and organizational changes. Following the death of Yevgeny Prigozhin in 2023, the leadership of the Wagner Group has transitioned to his son Pavel Prigozhin. This shift raises questions about the group's future trajectory, especially regarding its operations in Africa and the potential integration into Russia's National Guard. As geopolitical dynamics evolve, Wagner's role may shift towards more covert operations, leveraging its established networks to support Russian interests while adapting to the changing landscape of international relations and conflict. 1. Blackwater in Iraq. Blackwater, later known as Say Services, was a private military company that gained notoriety for its role during the Iraq War after a series of violent incidents, including the Nisour Square shooting in 2007, where Blackwater contractors killed 17 Iraqi civilians. This incident sparked international outrage and led to significant scrutiny of private military contractors, highlighting issues of accountability and the conduct of mercenaries in conflict zones. Blackwater's operations were seen as emblematic of the privatization of military force, similar to the Wagner Group's activities in various global contexts. 2. The French Foreign Legion, established in 1831. The French Foreign Legion is a military service branch of the French Army that is unique for its ability to recruit foreign nationals. Throughout its history, it has been involved in numerous conflicts, often in the service of French colonial interests. The Legion's mercenary-like status and the controversial nature of its operations, particularly in post-colonial Africa, draw parallels to the Wagner Group's activities, particularly its involvement in African nations for the purpose of securing resources and supporting friendly regimes. 3. The Condor Legion. During the Spanish Civil War 1936 to 1939, the Condor Legion was a unit composed of volunteers from the German Luftwaffe that supported Francisco Franco's nationalist forces. This military group was notorious for its role in bombing campaigns that devastated Spanish cities, including the infamous bombing of Guernica. The Condor Legion exemplifies the use of foreign mercenaries to further national interests in a conflict, akin to how the Wagner Group has been utilized to extend Russian influence in various regions, including Africa and the Middle East. The Wagner Group, established in 2014, has evolved significantly over the years, initially serving as a covert military force for Russia in conflicts such as the annexation of Crimea and the war in Ukraine. Its founder Yevgeny Prigozhin created a mercenary force that allowed the Kremlin to maintain plausible deniability regarding military operations abroad. Following Prigozhin's death in a plane crash in August 2023, the group's future remains uncertain. This analysis explores the group's trajectory, current status, and potential future developments. Current status and transition. As of late 2023, the Wagner Group is undergoing a transition under the leadership of Pavel Prigozhin, Yevgeny's son. This leadership change follows a tumultuous period marked by a failed mutiny against the Russian military establishment in June 2023. Despite the chaos, Wagner is reportedly being integrated into the Russian National Guard, which could provide it with more formal state backing. However, significant challenges remain, including maintaining its operational capabilities and adapting to the shifting political landscape in Russia. Predictions for the future. 1. Integration into Russian military structure. The Wagner Group may become more formally integrated into the Russian military apparatus. This could lead to a reduction in its operational autonomy, transforming it into a unit that operates under direct command from the Russian Ministry of Defense. This integration would likely aim to standardize its practices and enhance accountability, although it may also diminish the unique operational tactics that Wagner has employed in the past. 2. Continued operations in Africa. Wagner's activities in Africa, particularly in countries like the Central African Republic, Mali, and Sudan, are expected to persist. The group has established itself as a key player in these regions, providing military support in exchange for access to valuable natural resources. The merging of Wagner into a new entity, the Africa Corps, suggests that Russia intends to sustain its influence in Africa, leveraging Wagner's established networks and local connections. 3. Shift in recruitment strategies. The integration into the National Guard may lead to changes in recruitment strategies. The Wagner Group has relied heavily on recruiting convicts from Russian prisons. However, as it formalizes its structure, it may shift towards recruiting veterans and former military personnel to enhance its operational capabilities and public perception. This could also align with broader Russian military recruitment efforts amid ongoing conflicts. 4. Impact of Western sanctions. Sanctions imposed by Western countries may continue to challenge Wagner's operations. As a designated terrorist organization by several nations, including the UK and the US, Wagner faces increased scrutiny and restrictions on its financial operations. This pressure could limit its ability to operate independently and may force it to adapt by employing more clandestine methods or seeking alternative funding sources. 5. Potential for increased aggression. With the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and the volatility of the global geopolitical landscape, Wagner could be utilized for more aggressive operations, particularly in areas where Russian interests are threatened. This may include involvement in proxy conflicts or supporting authoritarian regimes facing opposition from Western-backed groups. 6. Public perception and legitimacy. The Wagner Group's legitimacy may be impacted by its integration into a formal military structure. As it becomes more publicly associated with the Russian state, it may lose some of the mystique and allure that attracted recruits and support initially. This could lead to challenges in maintaining morale and operational effectiveness among its fighters, particularly if they perceive a loss of autonomy. 7. Human rights concerns. The Wagner Group has faced numerous allegations of human rights abuses in its operations, particularly in Africa. As it continues its activities under a more formalized structure, pressure from international human rights organizations and Western governments may increase. This could lead to greater scrutiny of its operations and a potential backlash against Russian interests abroad, complicating its missions. Conclusion. The Wagner Group stands at a crossroads, navigating the complex dynamics of Russian state power and its ambitions abroad. While its future remains uncertain due to leadership changes and external pressures, its established networks and operational experience in conflict zones suggest that it will continue to play a significant role in Russia's military strategy, particularly in Africa. The integration into the Russian military may reshape its identity, but the group's adaptability and resilience will likely ensure its continued relevance on the global stage. As the geopolitical landscape evolves, the Wagner Group will remain a critical element of Russia's strategy to exert influence and protect its interests worldwide.